Activism Insights.
Activism Insights is an effort from volunteers and supporters of the venusproject.com resource-based economy and is not an official spokesperson, representative, or act in any official capacity, and serves only to encourage, support, and motivate other TVP activists.
Activism Insights. Activism Insights. Activism Insights.
Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Activism Insights. My name is Evan. I'm the POC or one of the POCs for Massachusetts. And today I'm going to be talking with Luke Wonderly, who's a longtime volunteer and the Venus Project supporter, and also the POC for Florida. Welcome, Luke.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be on Activism Insights.
Yeah. I
just want to say first off, thank you. Thank you for throwing yourself out there, being willing to continue this effort of the Activism Insights. It takes a whole lot of cojones for some people to get in front of a camera and try to conduct things, and you haven't hesitated at all. And just like your activism, it's like being a POC, just like the events, and I just really appreciate it and encourage everybody to stay tuned for some wonderful interviews that you'll be doing. And as the Activism Insight show continues to evolve and emerge into, a very positive and helpful approach for people to learn how to deliver the message. So I just want to acknowledge you and thank you, Evan.
Oh, well. Thank you, Luke. So how did you learn about the Venus Project?
I, like so many other people, learned about Jacque and Roxanne and the Venus Project through Peter Joseph's work, Zeitgeist Addendum. And as soon as I saw it, I saw the first one, the first Zeitgeist, and I wasn't happy. I wrote Peter. I said, what good is all this? Everyone gets all excited. And then what? Then now everybody's excited. Now what? And he came out with Addendum, introduced Jacque. That was a segue. And that movie and learning about them changed my life. It was just so, completely understood what Jacque was talking about, and that Roxanne was there. And that's how I learned about it. And I'm just very thankful that I did, and very appreciative of Peter's work.
What made you want to get involved with this?
Well, I had always been involved in some kind of efforts. I was raised religious. I was raised a Catholic. I went to Catholic school and studied to be an altar boy, and we were real big in the church, and Catholicism was about being responsible, and the Catholicism in California, where I was raised, was very serious. As children, we were terribly upset that kids in Africa were starving to death. We couldn't believe it. We wanted to take cans out of our cupboards and send them to them immediately. And our lives are always involved with volunteerism and helping people. And I grew up on a commune, and so that I had a different background in that, and I just felt that things were more important than our own selves. It involved us, so it did directly ascend to us when we did good for others. And so when I learned of it, the whole difference of all organizations that I had ever been with was that there was a plan, that nobody benefited in the background. Nobody in the back room was collecting money. I came here in '09 and I spent a week with them, And I asked all kinds of questions and, all that. And I saw for myself, and I just felt that I could be of use, that I could help it. And so I don't have a lot of skills in different areas, but what I am able to do, I do, just like each one of you.
And what are some of the ways you try to spread this message of this direction to people?
Wherever I go, man, wherever I am. We'll do another interview, but I have lots of ends to get people. You can't just go up, a world without money. You have to have some kind of way to get to talk to people. And I've been very fortunate. Once in a while, we go to have to purchase supplies for the center and go into town and deal with people from the city. And whenever I have a chance, I try to explain it. If you listen to what people are talking about, if you listen to what they're talking about, it's almost always the problems which are symptoms. They're not root causes. And so often you can have a startling conversation by uncovering that those are symptoms, not causes. So, and I've tried all kinds of different things. Right now, the latest project that I'm working on to deliver the message is music. And in the early days, that's what they asked us to do. If you can, deliver the message through poems, through music, through videos, through any way that you can. And so now I'm going to try to change the world with my songs and working on that. So wherever we are, wherever I go, I try to help them and show concern and to, just help them to understand it doesn't have to be this way. More importantly, that there is an effort, that there is a movement on the earth, this planet we call Earth, that there's a movement comprised of scientists and agronomists, all the disciplines, every occupation, every kind of profession people are in are involved with this. And so wherever I go, I try to help whatever I can do.
Okay. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about the peace walk you did?
Well, I did a 1,000-mile walk through the state of California. And it took a year and something because I talked to everybody. I mean, you could probably walk through the state of California in a matter of days. But I did a peace walk California, got in radio, television, magazine, and newspapers, reached over 4 million people, had over 22 different interviews. And I don't know anymore. That we all do. We read the book, The Best That Money Can't Buy. We listen to the audios and videos. We seek direction and clarity through Roxanne. And so I just did the best I could. And I look at some of those old interviews, man, they could be improved, but that's where I was. And so, I did a peace walk, and it was a tremendous experience. And I learned a lot about how to talk to people. What people are like in the streets, what people are like in the back alleys that go to work, that are in line in front of you. So that was a very interesting experience, and it was just another effort to try to get the word out.
How did most people receive the information when you were presenting it to them about, these ideas?
Good question. It was more times than not totally in line, totally thankful. There were very few. Remember, the whole auspice was this. The whole pretense was a peace walk. I never had one person, not one, go against peace. If I started talking about a world without money, they were like, "That'll never happen." They were totally, adamant. But the peace You know, attaining world peace was a wonderful way, and they were very open to it. So many of them were very appreciative. I had, and lots of army men, lots of retired and intelligence, and in every branch of government. And I learned how to talk to these soldiers. I learned how to talk, and most of it was just they would listen, man. I would lay a big rap. You know, and as Jacque says, you reach them through their values. I would talk about the water in their own municipality, how it's not fit to drink, and they all agreed. And I would just, you know, I over and over and over, they were totally, everybody in Congress. I walked the halls of the state of California in Congress and talked to legislators and employees and all kinds of people, and no one disagreed that we could solve problems, that we could feed everyone, that we could give everyone homes, and that no one disagreed when it came to automation, because you can't, you know, it's obvious. And so most of it, all of it was very appreciative. And, you know, there are a few, but when I consider the masses, all the thousands of people, very negligible, the amount of people who were against it.
Okay. What would you say to someone who wants to get involved the Venus Project, but they don't know what exactly they can do? Are there any tools you could offer, or ways of is there anything you want to say about that?
Yes. To really understand the aims and proposals of the Venus Project, the organization and the movement itself, is to read the book first. Read the book, The Best That Money Can't Buy. When I say read the book, that means forever. That means every few months you reread it for the rest of your life. It provides a very detailed and encompassing explanations of what this is all about. But then I would suggest, again, trying to get all of the lectures. They make them available on discs, and some of which are not available on the internet, but there's a tremendous, just a bounty of information and motivational and explanations available on the internet through the YouTube channels, posts and updates through the newsletter. That'd be another thing I recommend, is to instantly subscribe so you can keep up to date, to know what's going on. And that every single person, listen, I've heard a lot of people say, well, I'm just a housewife, okay? And people don't even begin to understand what is involved with being a housewife. From being a cook, to being a medicine, to being on time, to maintaining books, to maintaining finances, to doing all of these things with incredible accuracy, kids on school, in time, to the soccer, to all the different demands. And everyone has something. Everyone has desires of being able to be valid, to that they matter, that they have something to bring to the table, and everyone does. You just have to find out what it is. There's just so many different places within the organization, from writing, from doing transcripts, to doing translations, to just all kinds of wonderful, wonderful opportunities, many of which are very hard work. To look into becoming a POC, a point of contact, so that when someone from Massachusetts writes and says, I really like this idea, you know, how can I find out more? We can say, well, there's a person right in your area. We have a point of contact who's trained and can help you. And so becoming a POC and just spending more time learning about it. By doing that, your values will change. We know that the values we have, that's one good thing about the book, is that you learn that the values you have are just horrible. that you could be so uncaring about 60,000 people who starve to death today and will tomorrow if we don't do something. And that it takes you'll learn that over and over, we're told. If you don't do something, nothing will happen. It doesn't matter to the great extent what you're doing as long as you do something. Other things have more effect than others. So you can find out what's the most impactful. And if I learned anything from Roxanne, it's that you need to try stuff. Don't say it's forever, just try it, see how it goes. Learn by it, you'll become more proficient. You'll either learn from it or you won't, so you have to try things. And when you apply yourself to learning more about this effort, your values will change. You'll look at things entirely different. Again, as they say, it isn't about the architecture, about a different way of thinking, a redesign of our culture and our values. And that we can be tremendously powerful just in our ordinary day-to-day lives. So many people you come in contact with, so many people that are suffering and going through just hell because of this economic system, who, are desperate to find it out. So I would say apply yourself, learn all that you can, read the book. That's number one. And then talk to others, talk to your POCs. Call Roxanne if you have questions and you can't get clarification through the videos or something. Everyone's attainable writer. Write to others who do know. Everyone's willing to help. Everyone's willing to step up to the plate to do what they can. And that's what we encourage everyone to do. Everyone is welcome.
All right. And you've also, in learning about this and meeting other people, you've had the opportunity to interview a lot of other people involved in the project, even some people from what do you want to call it, way back when
Oh, yes, from the 70s, when Jacque was really he at that time was giving lectures at his home and had moved here from California. He had his laboratories in California and ended up here in Florida. And that's just a good segue, because we have a video. This is an interview that I shot at the center with Karl Geissler.
See the bananas up front?
No,
I'm gonna go take a picture of them too.
that is beautiful.
So we have pineapple and tangerine and oranges
Incredible.
and avocado.
Yeah.
And you want to see the bananas?
Yeah.
They're here.
Oh, yeah.
See them?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So bananas and
They have to.
mango and pineapple and
Yeah.
you take actual pictures too.
This is another good
My
spot.
friend
though.
Karl.
Huh?
And my good friend Karl. Yes,
But
it's a
not
good spot, huh?
huh?
It's a good spot.
It is?
And Karl, who has come here even in these days, comes and visits, was there in the 70s. And this is a wonderful interview. If you look back on the Activism Insights, a couple of years ago, I did an interview with him. And that's a good interview where he talks about, what it was like back in the 70s. And this one, he goes into a little bit more detail. In fact, he sent us some pictures. Jacque with long hair and swimming pools and just some cool stuff, man. As they were humans, just like us. And it gets pretty warm here in Florida in this summer. It's pretty humid. And they had a supporter who had a pool, and that's what this interview, following this one, you should probably make this short because the interview's an hour long, but it's worth it. Anyway, and then he talks about the early days of Roxanne, her arriving, and, it's just a great interview. And I hope that, people get a lot out of it. It helps to give us a more insight about Jacque in those days because I didn't know much about it. There isn't much out there. And Karl was just wonderful.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, I think then we'll end on that, so we can show that interview, because I think it would be very exciting for a lot of us to see and hear about that time.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about these things with me. So it's been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Evan. Thank you for what you're doing. And I want to also thank Liza Rucroft. Liza is back there, and most people don't know her, but she does a tremendous amount of work for the Venus Project and Roxanne. And she had done all of the editing on the past Activism Insights show, and she said she would help you too. And I want to thank, Peter. I want to thank everyone who's been on, and Surtaz Renuda out of Canada, who helped with the music on your opens and close. And I just look forward to the wonderful work that you'll do with Activism Insights and the cool plans that you and others have planned for it. I'm very excited and can't wait to see it. And thank everyone for what they do, everything that they do for the Venus Project, the center, their donations, and spreading the word as Jacque and Roxanne have asked us to do. Thank everyone.
All right. Well, thanks again, Luke.
You're welcome, brother. Bye, everybody.
Activism Insights.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Activism Insights, the show that's dedicated to those VenusProject.com resource-based economy supporters and activists that are out in the field doing the work to help bring this message and deliver it to everyone out there. This show is dedicated to you. This is September the 18th.
Yes, Tuesday.
And so this is another edition, and we have a wonderful guest. If you looked last year, we had an interview. This is Karl Geissler, who has been a long time, actually lifelong friend of Jacque and Roxanne's and a supporter of this effort. And he had, for many years, attended the early 70s, wasn't it?
Yes.
The lectures at Jacque's home, and is here to provide a little bit more insight of what that was like and the different insights about how Jacque would deliver and some of the wonderful circumstances and even going out and about outside of his home and adventures. So I'm very fortunate to have you here, and I thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
I just know everyone's going to enjoy this. I think the last interview we had talked about what it was like at his home and different people that would come. And it seems like, let's turn this air off.
Yeah, I think it's a
seems
good
like,
idea.
it was a wide variety of people who actually would attend, everyone from a policeman to doctors and lawyers, just a wide variety. And I think what's also important is for people to know what kind of sense of humor that Jacque had. That he had a tremendous in the way that he delivered and just as who he was. We had talked about in order for him to get a point across, many times he could mimic different languages or different people from different geographical parts of the planet Earth. And one of them was, you said that he had a turban. Tell us a little bit about that. I found it fun.
Well, first of all, I think Jacque could mimic many different accents, Irish, Italian, Spanish. And since I talk with a German accent, he mimicked German accents as well.
Convincing.
And really amused me a lot, when he did that. And he was very good in mimicking mannerisms, body language of different people, and so on, how they walk, their hand movements, and so on. And he used that during his presentations to make points, especially when he talked about different cultures and the way different people see the world. And so that was incredibly amusing. He mimicked like the speech, what he called metaphysicians, people that have a metaphysical outlook on life, like, a priest, for instance, praising God, or a monk that, talks in a particular way in looking at the universe from a metaphysical, supernaturalistic point of view. So he would mimic all of that in doing the lectures that he gave. And he was basically what I would consider a great actor, that he, in terms of movement, speech, and so on. So he used that quite a lot. And if you listen to the old lectures, and some of them are now online, you can hear people frequently laughing, and that's only in reaction to how he behaved. He also, what he did is on the board he drew sometimes very irreverent illustrations of something, let's say, of a face or something like that. And so it made it enlivened the presentation and the lecture that he made. It added something really special to it. It was not like a dry academic lectures that you generally get when you, let's say, go to the university, or at least, have a university professor talk on different brain functions or giving an analysis of something. It was much more loose, funny, irreverent, and he also used language in a very free mannerism way. He didn't believe that you should avoid some words because they are bad. He said, well, who decided what is a bad word and what's a good word? And so he would use free letter words like, fuck frequently or anything like that to emphasize a point.
Yeah. So. And to illustrate how a word could make a person combative, even violent.
Yes.
Yeah, just a simple word.
Yes.
Based on indoctrination.
How people react towards words, it's a very interesting thing to begin with, I think.
Yes.
And people use certain words for certain things, I think. And he pointed also out that, our language is very, very old. Yes. It has more religious, poetic foundation than a scientific foundation. Mm-hmm. And therefore, a lot of the words don't have really like precise meanings, but they can be interpreted in many different ways. The map is not a territory. And, the word is not a thing. And I think a lot of times people forget that. They get into word magic.
Yes.
God bless you all.
Sure. It's such a wonderful way of imparting his point through these simple ways of delivery, using certain words, even good words, or what other would consider bad words.
Yeah.
What was the one where he put a turban? He actually put a turban on his head? Or?
Yeah. We would gather frequently during the summertime at Chester's pool. Chester was a professional photographer, and he was a friend of Jacque. They met in Los Angeles when Jacque designed this metal home, this aluminum house, and Chester went there to photograph it, and so that's how they met. So then both of them basically ended up in Miami. So we would Chester had an older house that had a really large pool. Wow. And a lot of times, especially during the summer times when it was really warm, members of the group would gather at Chester's pool, and we would swim, and we would do crazy things, joke around. Then we would cook things up. Anything, Joe Fasuda was like a really good cook. So he would cook things up. And then at one time, and I had my camera with me, and I really regret that I didn't do a lot more photography of the group and of the things that we did, but nobody was really conscious of taking pictures. Mm-hmm. So during that time, I had my camera with him. And so Jacque put on a turban, and then he went like a metaphysician, it's like bless you all. I reached universal consciousness, my children, and so on. So he mimics, how, for instance, he used the vocabulary that people would use that, have a Buddhistic background, Eastern religious sort of background, universal consciousness and so on. And so he would mimic that. I took a couple of pictures of that, which I still have.
Maybe you'll share them sometime with us.
Yeah, I can if you want. Yeah.
Maybe we could include them on the video too.
Yeah.
And also, so at the you would get together. What was Jacque's house like? People sometimes think, and I've heard this, I think we all have at one point or another, that he lived some lavish lifestyle and he would take vacations and, had a real nice house of opulence and must have had all kinds of money. And that just simply is not true.
No. When I met Jacque, actually, he lived in an old wooden house.
Tobacco house?
Yeah, it's like a tobacco house. It was 2 rooms wide and an entrance in the middle. But it was quite long with the backyard. And then he moved to another house. And that house, he lived an incredibly simple lifestyle. He never wore expensive clothes. He never got dressed up. He wore a shirt and pants during the summertime, captain's hat. So he dressed very simple. We never went to expensive restaurants. We would go and eat together. We would go to, let's say, lower middle class Cuban restaurant or Greek restaurant or that sort of thing.
And that would be after the lecture?
That would be after the lecture,
Wow.
but also we would, during the day, sometimes we would spend time together. I would go with him, let's say, to a junkyard to get some aluminum or something like that. Or so we would go to relatively inexpensive restaurants. Jacque generally shared his house with Anise. Anise was an older woman that Jacque took in because she had some problems in her life. I don't know specifically what they were, but out of humanistic concern, he rented her a room in his house, although she was not really a part of the group at all, okay? That he did just because he was concerned about her.
So it didn't matter whether he wasn't about,
No.
in another, but to help someone who was...
Yes, he wanted to help her, so and then Joe lived in his house, and some other people lived in his house. Jacque didn't have a huge amount of need for complete privacy. He was a very social human being. He didn't mind being around human beings the whole day and in the night giving lectures.
Wow.
So he had a great tolerance for other people and being around other people and talking with them and relating with them.
Golly.
I would never be capable of living and doing what he did because I have too much need to be alone for privacy. Well, Jacque could, we would go together to the beach sometimes, spend, together part of the day on the beach. Then at night he would give a lecture. After the lecture, we would together go and have something to eat. They would talk for another 2 hours.
Golly.
And the next day he may do something really similar, where he was around most of the day, just around people. And sometimes people that he didn't know. And so
I think all of us, the world has become such a brutal and hostile place that we find repose within our own center of our home or camper or tent, whatever it is, to get away from all of that horrible abusiveness and hostility and inhumanity that surrounds us all. And so it's very understandable. I can understand why we would need some privacy just to insulate ourselves, to regroup, to go back out into the world and face it and try to help other humans. And I think it must have just been fascinating to go out. You'd already spent, how long on an average when people came to his home in a lecture, how long would that last in the home? Hour, 2 hours? Or?
Well, the lecture would be generally like at least an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. depending on, there was basically, I think I mentioned that before, Jacque, when their new person came in, out of courtesy, Jacque would give sort of an introductory lecture to that person about generally what his philosophy of life was and what he planned on doing in terms of creating a more humanistic society and so on. Mm-hmm. So he touched on these various points. When there were people that were there frequently and not a new person was there, then he would ask what we would like to talk about.
Wow.
Then he talked a lot of times longer. And that, but also after every presentation that he gave, there was the question period.
Excellent.
So there was always, when new people came in or the people that came there for, months and so on, there was a question period where questions were asked and then or objections raised to what he had to say,
sure.
Or clarifications about what he talked about.
Fantastic.
So it was always quite interesting. And what was also very interesting is that such a wide variety of different people came,
Mm-hmm. And a wide variety, almost every occupation and profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious. So then you had the lecture and had spent this time together, and then it was decided, well, let's go out, let's keep this going, let's have some coffee.
Yeah.
Would you always go to the same shop, or would it be different?
No, we would go to different restaurants.
I imagine that once you started discussion.
But restaurants within the neighborhood, that were maybe within 5 minutes driving distance
from his house,
Yeah.
And while you guys would be in the restaurant having coffee and we're discussing things, I mean, I wonder, did the server or the hostess or the waitress, would they listen in? Would other people kind of stop sometimes and become interested? Or?
No, the group that came together, we really didn't. Jacque, when he was in public, really didn't talk very loud.
Oh, okay.
It was a very quiet conversation. A lot of time also he would sketch. He would these placemats that you get when you go to a restaurant, he would flip it over to the side and then he would draw something, maybe a new design of a building or an explanation of a concept. So he would do that as well. Whenever Jacque would go out, he would basically draw, or if sometimes would be only 2-3 people, if I met Jacque during the day and we went, let's say, for lunch something, or Richard or somebody else, then if there were 2-3 people, he would then, during the time that we ordered food, he would then sketch. That was like his routine. He would sketch some new design, a new building, a new idea that he had about something.
Wow,
especially when it comes to architecture, he would constantly draw new architectural forms that he would play with.
What would happen with those placemats? You just leave
Oh, no,
them
they're
go?
still there. I think they are still in existence.
Fantastic. I can imagine there's some
then Roxanne told me there are over 500 different architectural layouts that she still has.
Golly. Yeah, and I think Nate, Nathaniel Dinwiddie, in charge of archive, has spent months and months digitizing and archiving and protecting his work. I'd like to have an interview with Nate. He's so busy, but we look forward to that. And you and Nate have had several interviews together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jacque had a beautiful hand. His line drawings, he used to mostly draw in ink and pen. And his line drawings are just beautiful. He had so much control in terms of how to draw freehand.
Did he try to teach you how to?
Fantastic. Yeah, I took drawing lessons from him for a while, and then I stopped. And I felt it became competitive among the people that went there, so
sure,
I stopped. But Roxanne, for instance, took drawing classes from him, and learned quite a lot.
Yes. Oh, golly, and the contributions that she made.
Yeah.
As she told me recently that we know how important it is that when people come up and say, I want to help, and you try to find out what is it that you can do,
Right.
What are you competent in, what areas of skill have you developed that can be beneficial to help in this regard. And she said that she would have just been useless to him had she not taken and learned from
Yeah.
him the architectural, and to such extent and such detail, it's so convincingly real, just fascinating, his ability.
Yeah.
And to convey that, he was always anxious to
Yeah.
every person that came here to help
Yeah.
them to learn how to draw and what that can do as a tool,
Yeah.
and how he used it to help others understand what he
Yeah.
was trying, the message, and
Mhm.
what he was, the idea he was
Yeah.
trying to get across. And
But he used his drawing abilities to explain his ideas and to bring his ideas better across, which I thought was fantastic, because normally when you, let's say, go to a lecture or someone, unless someone uses visual aids like photography or other forms of visual aids, people just, our culture is basically a much more of a verbal culture where the instructions are basically verbal. In physics it's mathematical, which is a different thing. But with Jacques, it was not just verbal, it was with, by drawing. And so that helped a lot of your comprehension, because you didn't just got a word, you got a visual reference. And I think human memory is largely based on visual reference. So it's an important aspect. 80% of what comes into our brain, our knowledge that comes into our brain, is through our eyes. So that's a good thing to know, I think.
yes, it is, and the different materials and brochures that we have available
Yeah.
to help convey this message
Yeah.
through that visual tool.
Yes.
And so another thing I thought was interesting is that, you all would go to the beach sometimes, and you would,
Yeah.
fascinating. I just
Yeah.
can't imagine what that was like to go to the beach with Jacque Fresco and have a round group and discussing things and swimming in the
We
ocean.
wouldn't have a discussion. When we went to the beach, there would be no really formal or any discussion.
Oh, okay.
We would just, was a free-flowing conversation,
Okay.
where we would go back and forth. Somebody may mention the book that they read or an idea that they had. And so we would go for long walks sometimes together. Jacque was an excellent swimmer, and he loved the beach too. He loved to go to the beach. I think that was one of the reasons that he moved also from California to Florida, because he did love the beach and he went frequently to the beach. And he also went sometimes alone to the beach, where he just went for a walk and so on. So that was a really important part of his life when he was younger.
Okay, and then I asked you, I said, well, did he swim nude, or?
No.
Because it's public.
We would go basically to the state park in Florida. On the tip of Key Biscayne, there's a state park which is called Cape Florida. It used to be called Cape Florida State Park. Now they call it Bill Berg State Park. And that is like a beach that is about 1.5 miles long, almost 2 miles long. And since it is a state park, there are no buildings there. They are just natural vegetation, and so you can see various birds like pelicans and gulls of various sorts. And so it was very, to the area of the beach that we went was the very quiet side of the beach where you could be by yourself.
Great environment.
Yeah, it was a wonderful environment, sea oats, very tall sea oats and sand dunes, so it was a very beautiful environment. And just sitting on the beach, I think for me personally, just sitting on the beach in a beach chair and looking up to the horizon line where the sky and the ocean meet and you see the circumference of the earth, I think it's so beautiful, So the blue of the water, the blue-green of the water meets the blue of the sky, which to me it's like an aesthetic, beautiful meditation. Just to sit there, wordless, you just don't talk and you just look out, It's a wonderful thing.
And being together too.
And smell the beach too, the beach, The ocean has, of course, a particular smell, a salty smell to it, and so on. So it's quite beautiful.
And you said Jacque was very tan.
Yeah,
a very strong
summertime.
swimmer for the.
Oh, he was a very, very strong. He was physically very fit, very strong legs. I mean.
Wore a black little swimsuit, same.
Yeah, he wore a black little swimsuit. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us would just kind of imagine what it'd be like to spend a day with Jacque Fresco.
Yeah.
In a setting like the beach.
Yeah.
It just must have been really.
Well, I can tell you one thing: you would never be bored. And there was just no way that.
And occasionally, when you were out in public, would other people recognize him, or somebody would know him from different things?
Yeah, sometimes people would misinterpret who he was. So, but when Jacque was in public, he was basically quite quiet. Basically, he was not. How should I say that? He was not necessarily very gregarious when he was out in public. Especially when people were with him. We more than sort of work quietly among ourselves and exchanged ideas and observations among ourselves. We would then rarely go out and talk to a stranger or something like that.
Okay.
That would only happen within a particular context.
And this is way before the interview with the gentleman.
Oh yes, of course.
His name?
Yeah, I forgot now what his name was.
Yeah, but that was a very popular, and I think he became recognized when people would be out in public.
Yeah.
And actually, while you attended these early lectures at his home, spent time with him, Roxanne hadn't arrived yet.
No, during that time Roxanne was not there.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you remember when she did, or kind of what it was like? Did she ask a lot of questions, or did she just listen intently, or do you remember kind of any of that?
Well, I think
all of us would be interested.
Yeah, Roxanne I think came like in 1975 or 76. I think she rented a room in Jacque's house and then attended the lectures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember very well when she arrived and so on. If I remember right, she worked on a cruise liner and she drew portraits for people. So she knew how to draw relatively well, especially.
I thought she knew how to draw. Huh?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's how Roxanne met Jacque, that she stayed at his house and then attended lectures.
It was very intent.
I'm sorry?
And she was very intent on learning.
Oh yes, she was very so, absolutely.
Did she ask a lot of questions or just kind of reserved
No,
in the
I
beginning?
think that in the beginning generally, very few people ask a lot of questions at the beginning. Like I did at the beginning, try to ask a lot of questions. And then he said to me, I remember once he said to me, at the beginning he said to me, Karl, let me just say something to you. I think it is better for you if you just come here and just quietly listen and assimilate some of the ideas and then ask questions rather than, asking now. And I think that was a really good advice I got. For me, it was a very good advice rather than, I was very philosophically inclined before I went to Jacque. I read like Nietzsche and other sort of philosophers, but I didn't have like sociological, anthropological or scientific background. That was relatively new to me. I was more philosophically inclined. And so, he said to me, just come, sit and listen to the ideas for a while, and then if you have questions, then ask them. Which I think is a really good idea for anyone. I think sometimes people, when you talk, exchange ideas with them, or if people attend the lecture, they don't have enough background sometimes, and that includes me, to understand certain things. And then if you rush into a question, that the question may have very little meaning. And so I think it's a lot of times better to familiarize yourself first with some sort of subject matter, so that you can ask an intelligent question.
Right.
So for me, in my case, that was good advice on his part, I think.
And it's so different to try to comprehend.
Yes.
And so many different levels.
Yes.
And you're almost in awe. There isn't much you can say. You're just to try to understand and get what he's talking about and to fully comprehend it. It just, for many of us, it's overwhelming and it's riveting, and in many ways, it's very reassuring. As we've all experienced some kind of horrible, effects from this society, we can relate to it. And to hear this is just overwhelming. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, for me, what was relevant was his critique of our own culture was, for me, very relevant. Certain things in our own culture always made me somewhat uncomfortable. But I couldn't really point out some of the things that made me feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And what made me feel uncomfortable was this whole obsession with money that made me always very uncomfortable, and that people, within our economic system, every action is supposed to arrive at some sort of profit. I could never understand why every human interaction has to be based strictly on self-interest or on some sort of profit that you arrive out of an encounter. To me, the joy of being together with another human being was to learn from them and have some sort of exchange of ideas, some humanistic exchange with them, touch them on a deeper level rather than on a strictly superficial level. And so I found when I was young, I found our culture very superficial, preoccupied with appearance and money and status, and it made me uncomfortable. That whole concept of, blowing yourself up out of all proportion, to me, it just made me very uncomfortable. So, and I couldn't really understand when I was young where this discomfort really lies, and I think Jacque helped me by pointing out certain things about our culture.
Right on.
That, where did this discomfort come from? So then I saw basically how really inhumane our culture is. It has like a veneer of religiosity and humanism, but the basic of our culture I consider relatively inhumane. The great differences in wealth that we have in our culture between poor people and rich people. I just traveled through the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the differences in wealth there is incredible. There are houses that completely stand empty, $1 million houses that stand empty, where people just spend their summer times here. And then there are other people that live in run-down trailers, among a lot of garbage and broken down cars, and physiologically in bad shape, really overweight, poor nutrition and so on. So our system, we have such high technological development, but it is shared so unequally among all the people in the United States. And I think this is why we have so many problems. That's why I think so many people, our lifestyle is destructive to a great extent. And so I think this is one of the reasons why you have so many millions of people addicted to drugs and alcohol. It's that millions of people have a real hard time adapting to the morals and the goals of our economic system, I think. And poor people don't count, they just like superfluous. Would be better if they would vanish for some people.
And yet one of the songs we're working on is called "They Always Paint a Pretty Picture."
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a picture.
Exactly,
It's
yeah.
not real. If you go
Yeah.
beneath that facade, the reality of what children endure and parents and
Yeah.
human beings, not inanimate objects, so what really it's like in the world from day to day. It's,
Yeah.
But they do paint a pretty picture of America and its freedoms and it's all, but you
Yeah.
know, it's not.
I don't think we really understand yet, or there's basically not enough written about, understood about, of what scarcity and poverty does to people emotionally and intellectually, how it affects them. You know, if you constantly have to be worried about that you don't have enough money to eat, or to educate your children, or your house is run down, and so if you're constantly struggling with the necessities of life, and you have never really a chance to develop yourself philosophically and emotionally in any meaningful way,
Yes.
that is disastrous for the individual, and especially for children when they're very young,
Yes.
if they are deprived of love and affection and of the necessities of life. And so that is very costly in our society, because today the individual is very, very powerful in regards to the damage the damage that an individual can do in a highly technological society is so much greater than, let's say, an individual can do in an agricultural society 2,000 years ago.
Right.
You know, there are no bombs, there are no machine guns, there are no automatic weapons. So the damage that an individual could do 2,000 years ago is completely different than what you can do today with an automatic gun. You know, they climb a tower and kill 48 people in Las Vegas because somebody has some sort of psychological problem. So I think if we would take care of people better, if we would, for instance, house people publicly, give them adequate housing and give them adequate food at least.
Medical care.
Yeah, medical care,
Yes.
exactly. How is it possible that we are spending, $700 billion on the military strictly for destructive purposes?
Yes.
And people, 58,000 people in Los Angeles are homeless.
Mm-hmm.
How is this possible? How can a society get so far out of balance in terms of the priorities that they ought to have,
Simply
to
based
me-
on the construct that they're using.
I'm sorry?
Simply based on the construct they're using, money.
Exactly.
As we get past money,
Exactly.
your values are able
Yes.
to shift. I mean,
Yes.
I gotta cut somebody off in traffic. If I don't get to my job, screw you, get out of the way.
Yes.
We treat each other horribly without any realization of the consequences, and so I agree with you all the way,
Yeah.
and that construct is going to necessitate that kind of aberrancy and unhealthy, both physically and mentally. People think it's normal. We talked about that earlier, about how people are living such suffering and don't even recognize it. Car insurance, health insurance, life insurance, the kids need braces, the car needs brakes, the rent's due, when is the water bill, I don't have enough. You forget about vacation, no job, laid off because they've brought in some automation so that it's a more profit. It doesn't talk about how the guy that lost his job, they get a divorce. The kids end on the street, raped, the kids are traumatized for the rest of their living life. These are not discussed in this construct, yet the picture is painted to be so attractive.
Yeah.
It's not so. And it's so wonderful that you were able to be exposed to that so many years ago.
Yeah.
And the way he delivered the message that reached us, the words that he used, the way his mannerisms, which are so unique.
Yeah.
And even his sense of humor. I got to experience a little bit of it. I think it's important that people are able to, get to see, based on your experience, what it was like, because he is no longer with us, and a lot of us miss him so much, and such a wonderful example to try to attain and to have aspirations of. One of the ways that he delivered the message was through humor, through his you know, his delivery.
Yeah.
Can you recall some of the more times that, you know, and even at times they were titillating. He would touch subjects that would never be discussed in a common, ordinary social setting. And can you recall some of those, you know, where it was kind of funny, something that erupted in laughter, or?
It's difficult to single out, you know, one specific instance after all these many years.
So much of it anyway.
Yeah, it was just, it was, you know, it had to do with the instantaneous reactions that he had to
Dig
things.
that, yes.
And the way he interpreted certain situations. What made Jacque so interesting to me was his it's hard, I can't really express it really well, but he had, you know, people use their backgrounds and their experience as a system of reference to interpret new situations. So when I saw, let's say, something that struck me as unusual or so, and I would go to Jacque and I would tell him about that. What was always so refreshing to me, that he could take a common experience and he could illuminate it. He had what I would call an unusual reference system based on his own level of experience that he had throughout his life. Don't forget, he was a lot older than I am. He was, you know, when I was in my 20s, Jacque was in his 50s, just about. So he was a lot older. So, and to draw on that, to have a person who has, you know, such varieties of different experiences throughout his life, and then studied also his whole life, various forms and disciplines. It was always interesting to me to hear his point of view. You know, it was like something refreshing, something new, something, it's hard to put your finger on.
Unrealized,
You know.
undiscovered, it just there all along.
It was a privilege to have a person like that around you that you could go to and say, well, what do you think about that? You know, did you see that? Did you hear of that? You know, did you read that? What do you think of that? And then just listen to how he reacted to that, you know. And so, and that sort of process can make an older person really, really interesting. Like a person who has studied their life long or is well-traveled or so on. That can make an older person fascinating, that they have these unusual references that they can give you an example. I think many times, a lot of times, we learn from other people by example. It's like children looking to their parents for examples, you know. How do my parents behave in these situations? What do they say in these situations? In what situations do they laugh? In what situations do they get, you know, a little bit out of kilter, you know? And so, and that makes the experience so much richer and better when you have people around you. And I always, from the time that I was a young child, I tried to search people out that were somewhat unusual, that deviated sort of from the norm of human life. You know, that necessarily didn't want to live a lifestyle that, let's say, they didn't want to have 2 kids in a car, in a house, and work for large corporations or anything like that. I looked more for people during my life that traveled a lot, studied a lot, lived a much more, how should I say, a more open, a more liberated lifestyle, you know. And I was much more interested in getting to know people like that and learn from them. And Jacque was, of course, the great exemplar of that. He was by far the most unusual person that I met in my life, and I have met many unusual people in my life that affected my life in various ways. But Jacque was by far the most unusual person that I have ever met in terms of what I was saying earlier, in terms of a reference about how to look at life, how to look at human behavior, how to look at human society. He looked at human society from an engineer's point of view. What is functional, what is dysfunctional? Why do cars have only bumpers in front and in the back? Why don't they have reinforcement all around? Why, it's only in the later years that cars became more intelligent.
Yes.
With
This was way before.
Yeah, that was way. Jacque talked about ideas of buildings where, he felt on a skyscraper, nobody should be on a skyscraper by hand cleaning windows. He thought that was absolutely ridiculous.
Yes,
that people would, be exposed doing such dangerous work, or, people doing work in conditions where they could get poisoned or they could get seriously physically hurt without some elaborate security system that you would have to protect the people that work in. If you add up all the industrial accidents that are completely unnecessary,
right,
that we have because of negligence, or the person who owns the factory just wants to save money.
right,
And so the workers are exposed to poison. Coal miners are ruined for life. They have black lungs,
deaths in their occupation,
and they get no proper compensation for the work they did. But the guy who owned the mine, who damaged their lungs, he gets all the money. He gets to keep all the money, and millions of miners,
And you'll never see him in the mines.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
And so he pointed out, Jacque pointed out people like Don Stein Veblen, who wrote about, the engineers in the price system, how basically our economic system is what he would call sabotaged, that we can produce a lot more than we do, but we want to keep the price of objects up so we curtail the production.
Conscious withdrawal of efficiency.
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly.
It's so well put.
Yes.
It's such a way that we really could get it. It made absolute sense, and a simplistic understanding, once you could understand it, and he had that way of delivering it to us. Well, and he certainly...
So, to me, that was a great learning experience, pointing out the design deficiencies within our society. Because I think if you want to make society better, you have to point these things out, and then you have to find a way to correct it.
Yes.
And of course, that was the point of having a more cybernetic system that is directly based on feedback, where, so if you look, for instance, airplanes, you have airplane crashes, but you have them quite infrequent. So airplanes is a pretty good system. I mean, it could be improved a lot, but in terms of safety, it's relatively pretty good.
Absolutely.
Especially in comparison to cars.
Yes.
I mean, if we had, let's say, cars you kill, let's say, 40, 50,000 people every year, right? Where if you would kill 40, 50,000 people by airplanes, people wouldn't fly anymore. You know what I mean?
Right. And yet, if we go back to the very beginning, when somebody thought about having the ability to fly, they were condemned. They were accused of saying that God made a mistake. That if you had wings, you were meant to fly. And we realize that, and even today, we see that with the advent of things like Hyperloop, 8,000 miles an hour, the potential to reach 8,000 miles an hour easily. I mean, they used to think you couldn't go over 60. There were articles about how your lungs would pop out and you wouldn't be able to breathe. And they would have sayings like, it goes like 60, because nothing would. And if you did, you died. And now we go hundreds and hundreds of miles across the United States in an airplane. So understanding that with Hyperloop, going up to 8,000 miles an hour would make flying obsolete. Absolutely. In as much as having an autonomous vehicle. You know, today, and I'll just kind of throw this out there for everybody, is that we give cars, which are really nothing more than transport units, to get us from one place to the other. I'm not even going to talk about where the hell everybody's going. Why is it, or where are they going? In a city of the future, there won't be any. Why would you want to drive? Where are you going? To the store and back with a few groceries? Having autonomous vehicles would eliminate amputations. It would be astronomical if you had every redundancy that we have the capability of providing through satellites and sensors on highways and bridges and all along any concurrent, any expressway, any highway or freeway. It would be astronomical for anybody to be hurt. Yeah. And that having autonomous vehicles, it would eliminate traffic police. Why would you need it? Or buildings for the courts, yeah, and the maintenance and the buildings, the electricity and all of that. Whereas it all started with you weren't supposed to fly. Somebody had thought about doing it. Condemned, like so often, all of us as activists run into people who say this will never happen. Yeah. And it's wonderful work of Jacque's that enables us to help them to understand why it can happen and should, and how easily. Once you understand that type of system, that construct that replaces an outdated one.
Well, if you would have 100 years ago, you know, on the turn of the century, you would have told the person that you can sit in your living room and you have a big screen in front of you, and you instantaneously you could see events that are occurring in China. You know, during that time it took weeks of travel by sea to get from China to Europe. And if you would have told that person in that time that you can sit in your living room and see what happened in China, they would think that you are absolutely, you know, out of your head.
Yes.
They would say, well, this guy is crazy, you know, the things that he talks about. So you have to be careful with when you say that ideas are completely unrealistic or that they will never happen, because we can't really predict many times the speed of the technological change that we are engaged in. I mean, nobody predicted the internet. Nobody, you know, and all of a sudden there it was. And it happened very fast, if you think about it.
Oh yeah, and I back in the 70s, I had a cargo cleaning business, and one of my accounts was Southern Pacific Railroad. And they said, check this out. And they took me over to a machine which was like a teletype. And they would communicate with another city instantaneously. I couldn't believe it. And those were, you know, the foray, a different telegraph, everything from the very beginning of Pony Express that led up, and we keep building upon the work of other people, built upon the shoulders of their work to improve, enhance, and enrich the lives of humans. And that's what you just mentioned is a very important point, I think, which is so overlooked, I think, a lot of times. You know, we raise people in every society raises its own citizens to be to some extent nationalistic and believe that their society is the best society of all other societies in the world, you know. Yes. So we know that we are free in America, though we are not as free as we think we are. Right.
So I think that the nationalism is an inhibiting factor. Like science, for instance, is completely international. I mean, the children in America owe their life to Louis Pasteur, who was a Frenchman.
Yes.
You know, and to Robert Koch, who was a German. You know, and so science is completely international, and that is what makes it so wonderful as an approach, because the information in science is shared across boundaries.
It's non-obliging to a country or a race or who you vote for or what you believe in.
Exactly. And your ideas, if you have new ideas, they are checked. Your research is checked by independent means. It's not your cousin or your uncle who checks your papers out and says, oh yeah, my son did this right. You know, we make it a pass.
Yes, and consider
it's independent, so it has validity, and the problems that we are having in our society right now is that science and the research in science is discredited.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the research in atmospheric science and global climate change is discredited. You know,
Yeah.
we have now people running this country that think global climate change is a fantasy. That where we have research now for the last 30, 40 years
Yes.
that clearly point out what's happening in the world.
Yeah, and it used to be called global warming, which
Yeah.
those terms were
Yeah.
reneged in order
Yeah.
to facilitate. Yes, it's absolutely true, and that's a natural effect of a construct based on scarcity. It has to do things. It has to corrupt anything that would go against it. And we know that whether they put in their own heads of departments that have an agenda and will write up things that are just simply not true, and whether the FDA made up of those who usually purported some of the worst crimes against human beings and the planet.
Yeah.
And so, and that really does exemplify the need to get past that, to get past money, which is a wonderful message that Jacque brought to us
Yeah.
all.
I also think that, and Jacque talked about that as well, I mean, that I don't think we are living now, I mean, our social system, our democracy dates back to the 18th century. And during that time, the fastest thing that we had was a buggy and a horse. And, when it took 14 days to go from New York to Virginia,
Yes.
and because the roads were so bad, and so the only transportation that was a little bit better was by ship of some sort or boat. Today, information travels instantaneous from any point in the world to another point. And so I think that our system is outdated. It needs really an overhaul, a major structural adjustment. And I don't think that, and I'm generalizing now, that politicians, businessmen, people who studied like lawyers and judges and so on, who concerned mainly like the House of Representatives, they're mainly concerned with rules and regulations that they can write and restrict behavior and so on.
Of an existing system.
Of an existing system, that is enough with the problems that we are facing today. I don't think, you need to have the only people that say that understand the physical operations of the earth, like people that understand the geology of the earth, the atmosphere, the oceans, and so on, are, people that study that, like geologists, atmospheric scientists, and ecologists that know how an ecological system operates,
Agronomists.
and so on. Yeah. They are the only people who really understand how the earth works.
And how it affects us.
Exactly. Because we are part of that natural system. We are not, we are not different from it. We are basically an animal in structure. Yes. We are a particular animal, but we have a body of an animal. We have to go to the bathroom and pee and shit.
And eat.
You know what I mean? And eat.
Every day.
Yes. So we have an animal body that gives us a propensity towards certain things, especially towards short-term thinking rather than considering long-term consequences.
Right.
That is part of our makeup that was useful in the past for our survival. But now it becomes dangerous because now we have to calculate long-term consequences. The things that we do economically today can backfire on us in 50 years from now. Like you have with, water pollution, air pollution, erosion of the soil, and so on. These are all consequences of behavior that we really didn't consider when we built our industrial system. We didn't consider air pollution. We didn't consider what to do with chemicals.
Carbon emissions and how
yes, and so on.
Well, and yet, later on, as they began to find out They would
Exactly.
hide it.
Yes, but then they suppressed
To protect their-
it because they didn't want to pay the cost of cleaning up after themselves.
Or even make their industry obsolete. Because
Exactly.
it was just, you know, and all of us really, you know, and Jacque was real good about this, could point out the most obvious. You know, what part of toxic do people not understand? What part of covering up your skin pores with rouge or your nails, what part of that being unhealthy do people not get?
Yeah.
They are led from birth to think that these are good and to embrace them and think, you know, to go to support it and encourage it. And now we find through the concerted efforts of those willing to speak up and be, you know, criticized, admonished, even, you know, ostracized from others, because it is more important to bring about something that is balanced and long-term and lawful, as all things are,
Yes.
to nature and to humans.
Yes.
Jacque was just a wonderful. I think it's so fortunate that you got to spend so much time, and every time we get together, I learn something so cool. And I hope you'll consider coming back and doing
Yeah.
another interview. Maybe
Yeah.
you don't have to wait a year. Yeah,
Well,
can
you know,
come-
this is, I think, again, this is what I really so much liked about Jacque. Jacque connected areas that you didn't see the connections prior. He would connect, you know, the environment and what happens to the environment to the health of human beings. He would connect the education of a person, the values of a person, to their behavior and how that person was brought up in what society during what time. So he would try to, during his presentations, he wouldn't give you a specialized thing. He wouldn't talk, let's say, an hour about one specific thing, which of course is necessary in parts of science, that you take out a very small part of something. You know, I think these are part of science we really still struggle with, and that is Jacque tried to point out, that today people are over-specialized. Today, if you want to be a heart surgeon, you know just basically about how the heart functions and what you can do about it. But of course, there's the whole body connected to that heart. You know, this is what's missing in our society today to a certain extent, although there is no change in science too. That before science was over-specialized, physicists didn't talk to chemists, and chemists, you know, didn't talk to biologists, and biologists didn't talk to anthropologists. And so you had all these different disciplines, but there was no overarching communication between them. And that, again, that what Jacque pointed out, is what is necessary today.
Holistic.
That you draw all these different sciences together and then say, look, what sort of civilization that is sustainable can we create in the world?
Yes.
How can we get rid of scarcity? You know, how can we create an environment that is healthy for humans to live in, that minimizes stress, that minimizes psychological dysfunction, you know? And so you have to start off getting rid of scarcity accordingly. You need to have people, their basic needs need to be taken care of first of all. They need to have enough to eat. They need to have adequate healthy housing. They need to have adequate, medical care. The children have to be educated in values that is supported not to an individual person, but to the group, to the society, to a world society.
Yes.
Because no nation today, regardless who they are, you know, this whole idea that making America great again, that you can just look out for America, is a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, I
You know,
agree.
because
Of course.
we cannot solve the world problems by ourselves. If the Chinese pollute the air and other people pollute the air or poison the water, we will suffer from that as well. Nobody is isolated anymore today. So you have to have a global approach, and that's what I also liked about Jacque. Jacque recognized very clearly that you need to move towards a united global system eventually. And this is another problem that we face today, because now, the world is still divided into nation states, and each nation state looks out for themselves or tries to look out for themselves. Everybody wants to export more things than they import, but that's impossible, And so then you have this military competition between Russia, China, and the United States now,
Perceived,
and
yes.
billions and trillions of dollars go into all of this, and it is completely useless because you can't do anything with an intercontinental missile.
Yes.
You can't do anything with a tank.
It's all.
It's all waste. You can't use it for making people's life richer and better.
Or sustainable.
Yeah. So the more money we waste on this international arms race that we are still engaged in, which we are now trying to go into space with, which is, absolutely insane. That needs to change. Human beings need to sort of, try to get together and to overcome these divisions. I don't think otherwise we will survive.
And that's what the
within the next 100 or 150 years.
And that's what the Venus Project's all about.
Yes, exactly. It's idea without borders, Yeah.
Global approach.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
understanding that we're all.
It's wonderful, what Roxanne did, for instance, so far of having this international corporations of people from various countries cooperating voluntarily and without pay, without great
Right.
pay. That to me is basically
And the
a
very
wonderful
pretense,
direction to go into.
which is the very pretense of the Center for Resource Management.
Yes.
A place that's very specific where people from all over the world, their different fields of expertise and fields and,
Yes.
and disciplines can come together on a platform to solve these problems. Yeah.
Let me say something else. I remember Jacque saying one thing that really I noted down. He said, in a sane society, there would be constant research for new approaches to improve the structure of this society and all its people in it. And I'm talking about that different nations in the world would engage. That's what Jacque was talking about in one of his lectures. Different nations in the world would engage in their own social research of how to invent new forms of societies and new forms of social system, new forms of technology, new forms of people living together. That to me would be a fantastic idea. So, let the Russians do research, let the Chinese do research, let the Japanese do research, let the Germans do research. And cooperate with these ideas.
Right.
Let's see how the education is structured in Sweden. Let's look at the child care centers, how they're structured in Japan.
And the results.
And see what their results are.
Society,
See what results do they get with
support
children.
that technology,
Exactly.
support that research.
And if you
And a
see that,
cooperative,
and
collaborative-
if you see that their ideas are better, adapt them.
Yeah, with you all the way. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
He was so right on about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
We're going to cut it because
Well,
we're
good.
starting to go in long.
Oh, yes,
And-
yes,
but,
yes, yes.
Let's just say that
Yeah.
you'll be back.
Yeah, I enjoy our conversation and the
All right.
opportunity to express, to talk about Jacque. I miss him. I miss him a lot, and to talk about these ideas. I think it's very, very important, and I'm grateful to you for the opportunity to have me. Thank you.
Well, yeah, you're so very welcome.
Okay.
All of us just
Okay.
appreciate the insight that you give us
Yeah.
in a real world situation and what Jacque Fresco in the early days with Roxanne
Yeah.
was like.
What he meant to so many different people, and how much he changed the lives of so many people. And I think it is important that people know that there was such a human being at one time who did that and thought about these ideas.
And he gives us the ability to continue that work
Exactly.
through our experiences, through
Yes.
different delivery methods,
Yes.
and also just having a better insight of what Jacque Fresco was like, which
Yes.
very few of us got to spend much time with him.
Yes.
And our experience was pretty impactful.
Yes.
So I sure do
Great.
appreciate
But, yeah.
taking the time out.
Yeah.
By the way, he just got through with a big one. He's been on the road. This guy is a road. He's out on the road trips doing some wonderful things, experiencing life, and also, you interact with everyone wherever you
I
go,
do.
and it's just
I
fabulous.
try to make the world a better place wherever I go, and I try to relate to people honestly and openly, to enrich somebody. I try to enrich every person that I meet in my life. I try to enrich their life in one way or another. That's my own values.
And like you said, through example.
Through
often.
example, yes,
Each
exactly.
one of us,
Yes.
usually as we learn more, our own values change. The way that we treat, the
Yes.
greeting people of genuine sincerity and helping them to understand that these problems that they suffer, as we all do, can be overcome and solved. So I just thank you.
Yeah.
This is another edition of Activism Insights, and Karl promises he's going to come back, and we'll go into some subjects. We'll go into some subjects
absolutely.
like religion, which you and I had talked about, and the early days of Roxanne Meadows,
Yeah.
and what that was like, and as she learned more and became such a powerhouse, and to
Yeah.
this day helps us all to deliver this message to this planet and get on with the job of attaining a resource-based economy. Sure love you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
For more information on the venusproject.com resource-based economy, log on to the venusproject.com website and sign up for our monthly newsletter. And check out the venusproject.com YouTube channels and Facebook pages.
The best that money can't buy is a challenge to all people to work towards a society where all the world's resources become the common heritage of Earth's people. It has 70 color photos of Fresco's original designs which illuminate the fulfilling lifestyle of a global resource-based economy. It is available in paperback, ebook, iTunes, and Kindle. Pick up your copy today at thevenusproject.com.